Okay, so let's get started then with this. So like I said, we're just going to do a quick overview here in the slides. And so the agenda for today is basically where does Framework Manager fit into IBM Cognos 8 BI? Very, very high-level architecture, just so you can see. So where does IBM fit in? The first point is basically conceptually, how does it fit in? And then physically is the second point, where it fits into the architecture. And then we're going to take a look at relational database types. Again, all this stuff is at a very high level. We don't have time in the hour-long session to delve into everything. But it's just to give you an overview of the different types of database structures that we typically deal with when using Framework Manager and modeling the metadata. Then the purpose of Framework Manager. We're going to go over modeling recommendations, again at a high level. Some of those modeling recommendations we're actually going to touch on in the demo that we're going to do. And a look at cardinality usage. Now these types of things are the touch points or the key points, the need-to-knows when you actually get into using the product. So that's what I was hoping to do, is to basically just touch on these things. It's like putting a bug in your ear, so that if you ever get into using the product, you'll go, oh, I remember they were talking about this thing called determinants that helps prevent double counting, and that bug is in my ear. And then you can go and read up on it, either in the documentation or in the course materials that we provide. Fair enough? Okay, so IBM Cognos 8 BI components. So this basically, I brought that slide in basically to show you where does Framework Manager fit in. So it's a metadata modeling tool, and you can see it sits, basically between the data sources and the actual Cognos connection and the studios that use it. And this tool is basically used to pull in metadata from underlying data sources, whether they're dimensional data sources, relational, flat files, and other. And that metadata then is basically modeled in such a fashion that we control and generate the appropriate SQL to give the end users the expected results when they're querying in the studios. So it does not bring in data itself, it only brings in metadata. It does not improve the structure of the data source, it simply generates SQL that brings back appropriate data from the data source. And it's got its cousin transformer that builds cubes and metric designer for Metric Studio. But we're going to focus on Framework Manager obviously today. Now, architecturally speaking, it is one of the interfaces that we use to communicate and work with Cognos 8. So you can see here that we've got web-based components, so that's IBM Cognos Connection and all the studios that you work with. And then Framework Manager, and of course Transformer and Metric Designer, and SDK applications that basically sit at the user interface level and can communicate through the gateway, the Cognos 8 gateway, basically to pull data or metadata from the underlying data sources at the Tier 3 level. Now, if using Framework Manager, and this is a Windows-based application, if it's installed or it's on a machine that's behind the firewall, you can actually bypass the web server and actually communicate directly with the dispatcher or a Cognos 8 BI server. And that's about as deep as we're going to go into architecture. Now, talking about the different types of data sources, what we're going to focus on today, if I just go back here, is the type of data sources we're going to be dealing with that we actually use Framework Manager to model metadata for. We're going to be dealing with relational data sources. And the two types of architectures for relational data sources are operational, or some people call them transactional databases. Basically, you're at Walmart or at Esso, a transaction takes place, that information is recorded, the credit card number, the client's name, zip code, all that type of information. But the way it's recorded is with the least redundancy possible. And so what that means is that basically these databases are completely normalized, and so that you've got a customer type and then a customer, whereas in a reporting database structure or a star schema structure, which is geared more towards reporting, obviously, all that information is just contained in one table rather than splitting it out. Same thing for products. So rather than having 3 product tables to basically normalize and prevent redundancy, we're just going to throw that in, and product lines will repeat over and over for every product type, and product type will repeat over and over for every product in this particular thing. This requires more space, but it's certainly better and more efficient for reporting purposes. And this is what we recommend clients be using when they want to use Cognos and need to go against a relational source. Okay, so the purpose of Framework Manager then is to basically take some of these really complex structures that you see here on the left-hand side and model them in such a way that A, they give you predictable results for the authors in the studios, you know, so that the numbers that are returned are correct. We're not double counting items. You know, things are aggregating properly, grouping properly, that type of thing. And then take that basically really complex view of the data and present it in sort of an easy to understand fashion for the end user. So we create these namespaces and we'll put our measures or facts in the one query subject and then present all the related dimensions that are associated with that fact, so that they know that if I want to report off of revenue, I know that I can do that by order method, order codes, time, product, and so on. And there's no question that these things all belong together. And so that's pretty much our job as a metadata modeler. It's not the easiest job in the world, I can guarantee you that, but once you get used to it and you get using the product for quite a while and have gone through several models, it gets a lot easier. Okay, and so now there's two types of packages that we can create for our end users. One of them is a relational model, which is essentially what we call query subjects with query items, and it's essentially akin to a table and columns in a database. So there's my timetable and my year column, quarter key. And most people are fairly used to sort of reporting in this style. The other thing that Framework Manager allows you to do is to actually supply or apply dimensional information and actually take this type of information here and provide dimensional context to it, so that you can actually say, I've got a time dimension, and I've got a year level, and the next level in that hierarchy would be the quarter level, the month level, and even down to the day level. And what this allows us to do is to take a relational data source and actually dynamically turn it into an OLAP data source at runtime, so that you can drill up and down on these things and do an analysis on your data, which you can't really do with the relational source. Okay, so what I can do is just pause here real quick. I'll open up Cognos Connection just so you guys can see what Framework Manager's output looks like to an end user. And I'm sure most of you have seen this already, but just for the flow of this presentation, I'll give you a quick presentation of it. So Query Studio, I'm just going to open that up, and we'll go with the relational data source first. And what you're going to see is actually the model that we're going to build in a moment. So here you see our sales namespace, our sales query subject containing all the facts that you're going to use to report off of, and all its related dimensions, so order method, time, and products. Okay, and people just simply drag in the items that they want, and we can see how much revenue we sold per year. Okay, it's fairly straightforward. I'm not going to write some complex report right now, but this is the relational view of our relational package. So again, query subjects and query items. And then the other one that I'd like to show you, again I'll use Query Studio to show you this, is the dimensional version. So the exact same data source from the exact same model, but now we've applied dimensional information to it. And so now I can bring in my product line, I'll bring in my year, bring in my quantity, can do a quick group by. Okay, and now we can actually drill down on this information and do an analysis. So what happened with cooking gear in the fourth quarter? Okay, how are we doing per month in that quarter? And that's pretty much the 1-2 punch on what the packages, the different packages look like in the studios. And of course, these are available in all the studios, Report Studio, Analysis Studio. Analysis Studio, of course, can't open the relational one, but it can open the dimensional one. Okay, so quickly going over modeling recommendations, and this is probably going to be fairly Greek to you right now, but as we go into the demo, hopefully it's going to become a lot clearer. So modeling recommendation number 1 is define reporting requirements. So this is really the consulting side of things. To understand what reports people want to write and what's the best way to access the data. Is it to use Framework Manager and to create a relational data source? Is it to create a dimensionally modeled relational data source, so the DMR package that I just showed you? Or is it better to use cubes? Are we reporting at a monthly level and we just, we want to get it pre-aggregated data and we want to access it very quickly? Should we be using cubes? So these are the types of questions. So don't just jump right in and say, well, Framework Manager is going to solve all my problems. It might not be the best data access strategy. Second one is import only required reporting objects in a phased approach and alter as little as possible. Now this is a preference, but the reason we say this is because models can actually become quite daunting and overwhelming. So if you bite off little pieces and model them and get them going, and if you understand how to model in an extensible fashion, so in sort of star schemas, it's easy to add subsequent star schemas into your model. And does everybody know what star schema is, by the way? It's a fact table in the middle with its related dimensions, and then those dimensions can be shared across other facts. I'll get into that in a little more detail shortly. Okay, but that's the idea, is to basically do it in a phased approach. Then once you bring in your metadata, your reporting objects, you basically want to verify your relationships and your query item properties. Okay, so are the relationships what you expect them to be? Are the query items what you expect them to be? And that we'll show you in the demo. Model in freehand, which is something we're not going to do today. That's basically saying let's print out an ERD of our data that we're going to be working with, or bring in the metadata into Framework Manager and print off a diagram of that, and start to identify problem areas that you can see where there's problems possibly with cardinality. Maybe there's missing relationships, that type of thing. So it's a really good exercise to do that in freehand because it'll get you much more focused when you actually start working with your metadata. And number 5 is to use model query subject to control query generation and usage and to consolidate metadata. So this is where we're taking these model query subjects and we can merge them together to force certain joins, or we can just use them to basically pull disparate query items from different underlying query data source query subjects, and basically just consolidate it for a nice view, so people don't have to go to multiple locations to get the information they want. Okay, just a few more to go through. Customized metadata for runtime, something we're not going to get into today as well, or very little, but that's basically using macros, calculations, filters to basically control what comes back. You can, for an example, you can say, for a particular user, I want to bring back a specific column. So if I'm in a certain region, or my user ID is in that session is a certain user ID, I can bring back column A instead of column B dynamically at runtime. Here's one, specify determinants, which we'll actually do today. And this is all about preventing double counting at a high level. There's more to it than that, but we are not going to go into too much detail. But for today's purposes, we're going to use it to prevent double counting items or facts. And then resolve multiple ambiguous joins. This is one of those ones where if you have the time dimension related to another, let's say a sales fact, and there's 3 relationships going from the time dimension to the sales fact, the order date, the ship date, and the close date. Well, you don't want to have 3 relationships between those 2 query subjects, because which one do you use when you query? And so you basically would create aliases of the time dimension to handle that. Again, that's something we're not going to be getting into today, but it's just a bug in your ear. And then 9 is create analysis objects. So that's the DMR piece that I was showing you before. So if you absolutely required to go against a relational source and do this type of analysis, well then you would apply the DMR and provide dimensional information to your model. And then finally is create the business view as a set of star schema groupings. And that's what I was telling you, where you take your fact query subject and all its related dimensions and put them in a namespace so that users know, hey, I can use all of these dimensions to report off of this particular fact. And that's it for modeling recommendations. And I do apologize if this stuff is dry, but it's sort of one of those necessary evils before you get into the product. And so this I want to go through very quickly. This is one of those key things that you really need to understand in Framework Manager and Cognos in general, how the query engine works, is how are query subjects treated. We view things as either a dimension, as you can see here, employee is a dimension, or a fact. So order details is definitely a fact in here, but order header happens to be a little ambiguous because in certain queries it could be considered a fact because employee to order header, it's a one-to-many, and anything on the many side in a query we consider to be a fact. Anything on the one side of the relationship we consider it to be a dimension. So this is one of those things when I said to model in freehand, if you see a query subject that has that's on the many side but also on the one side, that thing could be treated or is considered an ambiguous query subject, and then you need to know if that's going to be okay, or do you need to model out of that situation. And so in this particular query, when we're querying all the query subjects, order header is going to be treated as a dimension in that particular query. And that's because of this one-side cardinality. And if we change that query and omit order details, all of a sudden order header now only has ends attached to it, so it's on the many side, only on the many side for all dimensions, and therefore it's going to be treated as a fact. Okay, and this is important in the whole aggregation, how we aggregate things. And the last thing that I want to show you is basically something called a stitch query. A lot of times people come back and complain and say, hey, you know, I just did this query and I see this full outer join, and I shouldn't see full outer joins because they're resource intensive. And in fact, what's happening is that they have this thing called a conformed or a shared dimension. Another term for it is a shared dimension that actually is shared between the sales fact table and the sales target fact table. And so you can actually correlate these two facts together through this shared dimension. And what ends up happening in the stitch query is we actually send two subqueries down, okay, so time and sales fact, as well as time and sales target fact, and then we just basically stitch them, merge them together on the commonality that was taken from the time dimension. So if we report at the month level, all facts for all sales facts at the time or for the month level will be aggregated to the month level, and sales targets are at the month level, and basically you'll see, you know, January 1st and the roll-up of sales fact and the sales targets for January. Okay? And again, we could go into much more detail and look at the SQL for this, but this is all high level. So what we're not going to be covering today is calculations. We will probably do one filter, but we're not going to go into any detail. There's all these things, other things that we can do, security filters, using session parameters, macros, parameter maps. This is just to give you an idea that the product is quite powerful, but it's quite involved, and so it really requires some time to sit down and work with the product and actually get some training on the product. So what I'd like to do now is just get out of the dry stuff there and actually go right into Framework Manager and build a model, and that basically the model that you saw. So I'm going to create a new project altogether. Let's call this demo. We'll just select our design language as being English. And here's where we're going to go against the data source. Now there's various types of data sources you can go against. You can actually pull stuff from another Cognos 8 model, from Cognos Architect, Impromptu, Decision Stream, so forth. But we're sticking with the relational data source today. And basically, this is something that's already been pre-created. A data source connection is created in Cognos Connection, or you can create it from here by clicking New. And essentially, all the data source connection is the information that we're giving Cognos 8 to communicate with the data source. What information do we need to actually connect to and retrieve data from it? And once you have that data source configured, you simply select it, and then grab the metadata that you want from that data source. And in this case, we're going to go against the Go Sales Data Warehouse. I'm going to grab just a few items, one of them being the time dimension. I also want to grab some product information, so my product dimension. I also want the product line lookup, so I can have descriptive information about my product line, my product lookup, product type. I also would like sales fact and sales target. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in two facts and some related dimensions, as well as one non-related dimension, which would be order method, which is only related to the sales fact and not sales targets. Okay. Now this next screen is fairly important. This basically asks how would you like to generate your relationships between these query subjects when we bring them in. We're going to leave the default and we're going to use the primary and foreign keys because the constraints have been provided in the data source for the majority of the items that we need. The second section basically asks, would you like to create relationships between only the imported query subjects, between each of the imported query subjects and all existing query subjects, or both? Now this is something that's more important when you're doing subsequent imports. For now, the first selection is fine. And this other one here is convert to inner join. We typically leave this because this is the more efficient query. Outer joins are more resource intensive. So we sort of leave it at inner join and then adjust it accordingly as required afterwards in the model. And fact detection just basically says, do you want us to actually bring in, detect which tables we deem as being facts, which are basically going to be the ones that have foreign keys in them. Okay, so the one-to-many from product to sales fact. Sales fact is on the many side. Okay, and then we're going to import our metadata. Okay, so now that it's brought in, so this is basically the query subjects now brought in from our data source. So we've got the time dimension. Okay. All the product information, the sales fact. Now, we typically try to leave this view alone as much as possible, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in the diagram. But one of the things that you want to do is just go ahead and take a look in this view now and see, is everything the way you expect it to be? Are the relationships what you expect them to be? Sales or the product dimension, yes, a one-to-many to sales fact. And then we go and look at sales target, which has no relationships. So there's a bit of a curiosity. So we know that some constraints have not been applied or relationships have not been defined in the data source, but we're certainly capable of defining them here in our product. But again, it might be a conversation you might want to have with the DBA at that point. Okay. Not only do we want to look at the relationships and see, okay, there's certain things missing here, like product lookup to product dimension. Okay, so something hasn't been defined there, so we know that we can relate that on product number. So I'm actually going to go ahead and create a relationship between these two items, okay, on product number. And I'm going to leave it as a one-to-one because this is just a lookup table. And one of the things I'm also going to do is, just now that we're dealing with this particular item, is I'm going to go ahead and test this item and take a look at it and see if there's any problems with it. And of course I know there is because there's multiple rows for each individual product. You can see product numbers repeating several times here, right? One for every language that's being supported in this multilingual data source. We're just going to want to deal with English today, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter to this particular item, call it a language filter. And in the definition I'm simply going to say, return me only the rows where the value equals EN. We put that in single quotes. So now when I test that object again, I only have one instance of product number, so now that's unique, and I'm only bringing back English values. Okay, so we've got that in place. The other thing that we're going to look at is the query item properties. So if we actually select this and look at product type key, we can see that the usage property for this is set as fact. Now when we import metadata, if it's an integer and it's not indexed, we're going to mark it as being a fact. So this is one of those things where if we're going to do a lot of querying or filtering on this product type key or use it in a relationship, we're going to want to go back to the DBA and say, look, you're going to want to index this in the data source for us, and that way you'll have better performance. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that particular item as an attribute, not as an identifier, because I want to have some sort of documentation to myself as a modeler that this is not indexed in the database and I need to have a conversation with the DBA. Now we can do this for all the items that have come back that are incorrectly identified. And so one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to use our search tool to quickly do that. and I'm going to search on fact for query items and for the usage property. So all the items that are marked as fact come back here, and I can actually do a batch change on these items. So let's see, so we can see month key, current month, all these things are definitely not facts, all the way down to close day. So those are all items that should be either indexed or considered attributes. Of course, quantity, unit cost, and all that are definitely facts, so we're going to leave those alone. So now that I have all of those selected, I can just go into my properties sheet here and change the usage property for the first one to attribute. And I just take this little black arrow and drag it all the way down and change everything to an attribute. So now that's all good. So I've done a little bit of prep work now here in my database view. So one thing I'm going to want to do now is start to model in layers. I'm going to want to create a namespace and put this in something called a database view or import view, whatever you want to call it. And just simply organize my objects in there. And we can always go back at this and look at this to see what's going on in the database. We can also update these items as changes occur in the database. But for reporting, we want to create this installation layer. Okay? And this is going to be called our business view. Now there's a lot of literature around this too. There's different ways of doing this. Some people will actually, I just want to move this up to the top here. Some people actually do some of their modeling in here and do all the relationship work in this particular view. And some people actually prefer to just create a bunch of model query subjects, specify all the relationships there, and just have that be their working area and literally leave this section alone. That's fine for when you're not dealing with large models, but if you're dealing with hundreds of tables and the model size starts to creep up in size, there is a point where there's a publish size limit and your model will become unpublishable. So in those cases, you'll want to do most of your modeling down in the database view and just use this as for model query subjects for presentation purposes. But we just have a very small subset here, so we're going to create a bunch of model query subjects and build up a business view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with an easy one here, order method dimension. I just want to bring in a few of these items. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and right-click and create a model query subject. I'm going to call this order method. And from the data source view, I'm going to grab the items that I need from that particular query subject. In this case, I only need 3. Okay, and so there you go. So now I've got a model query subject that the authors in the end result are going to use. And of course, you can go in here and you can give them nicer names. I'm not going to rename everything because just for time's sake, but just to show you that that's basically what the intent of this sort of area is, to basically present things in a much neater fashion to the end user. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create another query subject for the time dimension. And so from the time dimension, there's only certain things I want to bring in. I don't want to bring in all the items. Okay, and you can organize these any way that you want. You can put the year on top, which I'll actually do now. If I did bring in the current year, yes I did. So year, quarter information, and then go to the month. And then of course date. And there's other things that you can do too in a query subject to make it a little neater and not so cluttered. I typically create a keys folder, and then I'll take all the keys and place them in that particular folder to get them out of the way. And so this looks a lot cleaner now to the end user. And again, just for the time dimension, just for posterity, I am going to rename these to be a little cleaner. this is a numeric value for the month, and then this is the actual string value for the month. And I'll just do day. Okay, so now we've got order method, time dimension in there. Just got a few more to go. Now there's other ways also to do this, where we can actually merge query subjects together, and that's what I'm going to do for the product dimension, because there's a bunch of them that I want to bring into one sort of query subject. So I'll start with the highest level product line lookup. So I'll take product line from product line, product type, and then product name and description. And I'll go to the product dimension and grab the product key, all those codes and keys that I require from there. Maybe the product image, introduction date, and discontinued date. I simply right-click, and I'm going to merge this into a new query subject. It's going to ask me if I want to recreate the relationships. At this point, I do not, because I want to move this into another namespace and control my relationships by myself. Okay, so here's this new model query subject that was created, and we're going to call this products. And we'll bring it up into our business view. And all we have to do now is bring in our measures. And again, you can see that modeling, there is a bit of work involved in this, but once you get it set up, it's much easier to deal with it and understand how your model's working. So I'm just going to create another query subject here. I'm going to call this sales fact. You guys will shout out if I have a spelling mistake, I'm sure. Okay, and so for this, we're going to bring in all our facts, as well as all of the keys, okay, because we're going to require these keys to create our relationships in our business view. And I'll do the same thing for sales target. Okay, so now we've got this business view created, and if we look at this in the diagram, I'll just close some of these windows so we have a little more real estate to work with. So there's no relationships created yet, but we're going to do that now. Okay, and so a little trick is I'm just going to put my facts in the middle here. Is to basically select your key from the dimension first, and then select your key in the fact second. So order method key and order method key. Right-click and create a relationship. This way, it's going to always put the first one you selected on the sort of dimension side, the one side, and the fact on the many side, so that you don't have to reconfigure this after the fact. So that's just a little trick. I do not want to create other relationships. I'm going to take full control of relationships. From the time dimension, we're going to want to go from the month key to the month key and sales target fact. Click OK. We're going to want to go at the day key to the day key or order day key in the sales fact. One to many. And then finally, product is going to go from the product key to the product key in sales fact. And product to sales target fact is actually at a different level. It's actually at the product type key level. Okay? So we have two dimensions that you just saw that are at different levels of granularity between the facts. So sales fact rolls up to the product key level or the product level, whereas sales target facts roll up to the product type level. And same thing for time. Sales target is at the month level, and sales fact is at the day level. Okay, so there you go. We've got two facts, two related dimensions or shared dimensions or conformed dimensions, however you want to call them, and one non-conformed dimension that's only related to sales fact. So we're in pretty good shape right now. We've actually got something that we can start to use. There are some things that we're going to need to fix. What I'm going to do though is I'm actually going to go to the next level, and then we're going to come back and fix the item that's going to break, and I'll show you that in a moment. So what I like to do is I like to have the facts at the top. I just organize it that way, and the dimensions at the bottom. Now that we have these relationships created, we're going to create a new namespace, and this is sort of the final presentation namespace. And what goes in here is basically those logical groupings that I was telling you about, facts and all the related dimensions. So what I'll do is I'll actually just right-click sales fact and say create a star schema grouping, which will automatically do that for me. So my sales fact and all its related dimensions. And I'll click OK. And I'll take that namespace and put it in my presentation view. I'll do the same thing for sales target. And of course, you can organize these alphabetically. If you want, you can just do a quick reorder of the objects in ascending. Okay, but like I said, I like to keep the facts at the top, so I'll keep that at the top. And this one I'll just do manually. Okay, so now we've got something that's fairly nice to present to the end users. So we'll finally create a package. Okay, I'm going to call this Go DW Query, because we know this is a relational source. Okay, I'm just going to deselect the root and only select the objects that I want to bring in. So that's those two namespaces, my sales fact and my sales target fact. I only want to publish up, this is an Oracle data source that I'm using, so I only want to publish up that function set. Otherwise it's just extra overhead. And then I'm going to publish the model. I'll just leave verify package before publishing. You can also verify your entire model, so it'll check for any errors, items that need to be reevaluated, any problem areas, so that you go ahead and fix it. But like I said, we don't have enough time to go into all those details today. So here's some information it's providing to us after it was verifying the package. And all this is informational message saying the items that you're publishing have underlying objects that they rely on. So those underlying objects are going to be published with the package, but they're going to be hidden from the end user. So this is okay. It's when you see those yellow triangles that you want to pay attention, or red X's. Okay, so we've actually published that up to Cognos Connection now. So I'll open up the Cognos Connection. Okay, so there it is. Go DW Query, and I'll open this up in Query Studio. And start to write some queries with this. So right now I'm just going to do a fairly simple one where I take my year and month and my sales target. Okay, we can do a grouping here. But the key thing that I want to do is I actually want to look at my overall totals. Okay, I know that this number is definitely insane. There's no way that that's the right number. So what's happening here is there's double counting occurring. Okay, and that's because sales target is at the month level, but the time dimension at the month level has repeating values in it. So let's go take a look at what that looks like in Framework Manager. So we'll go ahead and take month and day, year, month, and day. We'll just do a quick test on this to take a look at the data. Yeah, I just put AutoSum on to emulate what's happening in because we do auto summarization in Query Studio and Report Studio by default. Okay, so here we can see January repeats 4 times. Okay, one for every date. In fact, if we actually sorted this, it would repeat one for every day in the data source. So this has a potential to repeat, 31 times. And that's basically what we're aggregating, is 31 versions of the sales target. So we need to control our SQL to group by the month when we bring that into the query. And the way that we do that is by specifying determinants. So let's take a look at determinants real quick. That's something we specify in the time dimension. So what I'll do is I'll add, at the highest level, because I know there's a logical hierarchy here in my data, so I'm going to create a determinant called year. Okay, we're going to want to group by that because it's not at the lowest level. And the key for year is actually year because this is just an integer value, and it's also its own attribute, so we have nothing else to put in the attributes pane. Next in the line is quarter. Okay, also group by that. And so what goes in quarter would be, or for the key for quarter would be quarter key, and then the attribute for that would be quarter. Now we'll add the month one, and this is the one that we really are concerned about because we have a relationship on it, and that's what was causing us grief. And so we'll use the month key for that, and month numeric and month will be the attributes for that. So now when I select month in my query, it's going to use this month key to group by and not double count those sales target values. And of course I'm going to add my last determinant, which is the day determinant. This is going to be the unique row, and the day key uniquely identifies that. Now again, we don't have time to get into the details of this. There's all kinds of literature on determinants. I highly suggest that you do read up on it to understand this. But suffice it to say, in this particular scenario, we're using it to control a group by in our SQL when we query month against sales targets. Okay, so we specified that, and we also have to do it for products because we know products is at has repeating values for product line key. So again, we'll just create our product line. And so product line code, I believe, is the key for this one. And product line EN will be the attribute. Product type. Product type key is the key. In this case, code. There's some inconsistencies in the data that you can see here. And product type EN is also an attribute. And then we've got product. And that's our unique level, and product type key is the key for that. Okay, so we've got the determinant set for both these items because they do have multiple levels of granularity in them. And the determinants, when they are evaluated in order, so the engine comes in and looks at product line first. It's not required, and it'll look at product type. So if product type's being used, yes, it will then implement this determinant and put the group by in the SQL. Now another thing I didn't mention, and again we're not getting into the details, but SQL is going to be your best friend when using this product, so knowing SQL is almost imperative. And so every time you do something in here and you perform some sort of test, so if I do product type against sales target and do a test, I'll put AutoSum on here, you're going to want to go and look at the query information and look at the SQL. And see what the SQL is doing, and there's our version of the SQL and then the native SQL, all for debugging purposes. And you're going to want to look at that and make sure that it's what you expect it to be. Okay, and if it's not, then you're going to have to go back and take a look at what you've done in your modeling. Okay, so now we've fixed those items. So let's go back and write that report and see if it's behaving a little bit better for us. So I'll just republish the package. I won't verify it this time. And I'm actually going to close, just for caching purposes, I'm going to close my session and reopen. So I'm going to go back into Cognos Connection. And everybody keep your fingers crossed because it has happened before where things just don't work in the demo the way you want them to because you've missed something. Okay, so we'll do that same query with year, month, and sales target. And we'll do a group by on year. Okay, so these values are looking a little more reasonable. we go down to the bottom, we can see, yes, okay, that's correct, 4,205,000,000, yeah, that's looking like what we want to look like. And not only that, we can also include product information in this query. Let's bring in product line, for example. See how the product lines are doing. We'll group by month. Okay, so now we can see how everything's performing over the months. And of course, because we've got these two namespaces now, and I've used products and time, so I've used some shared dimensions, I can now bring in my sales fact and compare my revenue against my sales targets. And that is only possible because I am using these conform dimensions. Okay, so now you can see the performance between what you actually sold to what your target was, and it looks like, of course, in our wonderful world of data, we're doing better. Okay, so we've basically shown you the majority of things. We're getting close to running out of time, but if you guys are okay to stay on for another 10, maybe 15 minutes max, I can actually go through and show you the final stage on creating DMR objects. Is everybody okay to do that? Okay, great. And any questions so far? Now's a good breaking point to have some questions answered. Okay. Is there a quick way to order the months? Okay, so you want to order them by their key. So basically, you want January, February. Yeah, you can use the key. The key should be the correct ordering item that you want to do. For relational data sources, not as easy as it is in DMR. DMR, you can definitely do that, and that's something I was going to show you. But yeah, if you want to order them, yeah, you'd want to bring in the key and then order on that. No problem. Okay, so we're going to bring in one more layer then to create our DMR objects. So I'll create another namespace and call this one dimensional view. I'm going to place that above business view. I like to do it this way because this is sort of the order of operations. You know, this is our foundation. This is where we're doing our logic. This is where we're doing some more logic based on this logic in the business view, and then of course presentation view is your final presentation layer that goes out to the audience. Okay, so let's start off by creating the easier objects. We'll start off with measure dimensions. So again, we're taking it from the business view, and in this case, all we need to do is bring in our measures. That's it, that's all. We've just created a measure dimension and we're done. And I will name this sales. Do the same thing for sales target. Okay. And then I'll start off by creating our first regular dimension. I'll use the easiest one first, which is order method. This is a hierarchy that only has one level, so it's pretty straightforward. I typically take the key first to drag it in to create my level, because that's going to automatically set it as the business key for this particular level. And of course, you're going to want to give these things better names. So order method hierarchy for one. Order method all, and then finally order method. Okay, and there's two things that you need for each level that you have in here. Okay, this level here is for free. We give that for free. There's nothing that you need to do on that. It's just a roll up for everything. But for each level, you are going to want to specify a business key. Okay, so what's the unique identifier that's going to be used to do your grouping and your aggregation? And then a member caption. So what's the nice value that you're going to present your end user? In this case, order method is going to be our caption. And I'll get into unique level. Right now there is only one level. Unique level basically means, do you require the parent level to make this level unique? And in this case, there is only one level, so I have no parent, therefore I don't need to check it. Okay, so there we go. We've got one regular dimension created. Now we're going to start creating some slightly more complex dimensions that actually have levels to them. We'll go with products because that's a little easier. I'll leave time as the last one. So we're going to want to bring in product type or product line code. So that's one level. So that's the unique identifier for that level. I'll just create all my levels first and then go back and configure them. Product type key, so product type level, and then my product level. Okay. Again, I apologize for having to go through this tedious process of renaming everything, but it's going to look really silly if I demo this without renaming them. Okay, so now let's go through and configure each one of these. So product, we'll start with the lowest level. It is unique. It does not require its parent. I know product key is unique in this data. Again, you must know your data. And I want to bring in product name as my caption. For product type, same thing. I do not require the parent level. I am going to set the key as the business key. Okay. Now, it didn't automatically do that because this thing's set to an attribute as opposed to an identifier, so we have to do this manually. Again, we'll want to go back to the DBA at some point and say, please index this in the database. And we want to bring in our caption. And then for product line, we do not need to specify unique level here because it's the top level. It doesn't have a parent. And then we'll bring in the product line in as the caption. Okay. And one thing you can do is verify the entire model or just in selected objects. So as I'm working on this, I can say, verify all these items that are checked off here just to make sure everything's okay with the object. I see there's no issues, so that's great. So now we're going to do the last one, and this I save this for last because it's got some key elements that you need to know about, and that's that your business key actually has to be or sorry, not your business key, but your caption must be a string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by creating the year level, use my quarter key for the quarter level, month key for the month level, and day key for the day level. Okay, so let's start off with the day level. That is unique. Day key is the business key, and now I want to have a member caption. Okay, go to the month level. That's also unique. Again, it's not indexed, so I have to specify the business key. And I want to use month as the member caption. Same thing with quarter key. It's not indexed, so I have to specify this manually. And then we'll use quarter as the member caption. And then finally, specify this as being unique as well. And then year level, we're going to specify this as being both the business key and the member caption. Okay. So what I'm going to do is click OK, and I'm going to verify this object. Okay, so we've got several errors here, and they're all pretty much the same, saying that the member caption role must be of type string. Okay, so these are all either dates or integers and cannot be used as a member caption. So we go in and fix those now. The easiest way to do that is to take day. Okay, so we test that out and we see it's a date. So what we want to do is we actually just want to show just the date, not the date time. So we can cast this and say, actually I'm going to do a cast within a cast. Okay. So I'll cast this into a date, and then into a character overall. That'll be 10 characters long. Okay, so if I hit this again, I now bring back just the date, which is what we'd like. And click OK. Okay, so now I've got a string value here. So month, I believe that one was okay. And was it complaining about month as well, you guys remember? No, it shouldn't be. Okay, so quarter, that's an integer. So we'll just cast that into a character. Okay, the results are fine. And same thing for year. We actually have to create a new item here for year. Call this year caption. And so we actually will go back to our business view, grab the year key, and cast that to a character. Okay, so I think we're in good shape here. We just have to go ahead and specify that as a member caption. It warns us that we're now removing member caption from another item and placing it here, which is fine. And click OK, and I'll just verify this object again. The last thing I want to do is publish out and have a mistake. Okay, so we've cleaned it all up. Now, the last thing that we want to do in the dimensional view is actually specify scope, okay, for each of the measures. First of all, in the diagram, I actually want to see the scope relationships. Okay, so now if I look at these scope relationships, I can instantly see, yeah, that one we don't really need. Order method to sales targets, not something we need. Now we can go ahead and delete that here, or we can go to the dimension map and actually just look at each of the measures and see what they're in scope with. So I know sales needs to be in scope with everything. Sales goes right down to the day level and time dimension to the product level, and it's in scope with order method. But sales target, on the other hand, does not go down to the day level. It goes down to the month level. So I select the month level, and I set scope to be at the month level. Same thing for product. It's at the product type level, so I set the scope, and I remove product from being in scope. And this particular hierarchy is completely not in scope, so I remove that altogether. And if we go back to the diagram, you'll see that scope relationship is now completely removed. Okay? And what this does is if you, in Analysis Studio, you're using time dimension against sales targets and you start drilling down to the day level, you're just going to see blank fields. Okay, so I'll just save this. And so now we've got this, so we're almost done here. So we essentially have now the dimensional view. So we want to augment our presentation view. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create one called relational and put these items in the relational namespace, and then create another one called dimensional. Okay, and now I'm going to create those star schema groupings again for my dimensional objects. So right-click, create star schema grouping for sales, and there you go. Okay, so I've got sales with all its related dimensions. I click OK. I put that in the dimensional view. Same thing for sales targets. That goes in the dimensional view. Okay, again, you can order it. Just to save time, I'm just going to create a new package right now. And this will be called Go DW, and this will be our analysis package. And what goes in that is simply just our dimensional objects. Okay, again, like I said, I'm recording this so everybody can go back and do this in slow motion later. Okay, again, we're just getting warnings. We don't see anything that we should be concerned about, so we're okay with the package. And in Cognos Connection, we'll just go back and take a peek and see that we've got our analysis here, our analysis package here. And I'll open that in Analysis Studio. Okay, so now we're taking a completely dimensional source and we're treating it basically like it's a cube. I'll select my default analysis. Of course, it's the first time it's loading, so it's a little slower, plus I don't have the fastest machine on the market right now. Okay, so here you can see we've got our products across time for the quantity measure. Of course, we can change that to be our revenue or sale total. We can now drill up and down and go down into accessories, drill down on the year, quarter. Now, one thing you guys are noticing here, these things are all out of order, right? And that's something I want to go back and show you how to fix that in Framework Manager for these dimensional sources or dimensional, the DMR objects. Okay, and then one thing I also wanted to show you was I'm going to bring in sales target instead here. And if I drill down on April, I go down to the day level, you can see it's out of scope, so I don't see any data for that. And if I drill back up, all of a sudden I see data again. Okay, so let's go back and take a look and see how we can actually control the order of these items without fail, so that they appear in the order that you want them to. Okay, actually they appear to be doing okay here in this particular setup, but to be sure, you'll want to go into your objects, and time dimension is probably one of the more important ones. This is a new feature in 8.4, something called members sort. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to sort the metadata that's shown in the tree. Okay, so that's one thing. But it also allows you to sort the data. So the second you drop that on to the report, it's going to sort the data in the order that you specify here. And beyond that, you can just have it as a default report sort, or you can basically ensure that the data, when it gets spun into this cube that we build at runtime for the DMR objects, that the data is actually sorted in there so that you can use dimensional functions to do analysis between periods. So if you want to do parallel period from this year to the previous year, you're going to ensure that if you're in 2007, you're actually going to go back to 2006 and not accidentally go to 2005. So that's the intent of making it OLAP compatible for dimensional functions. So they've got a cool feature here in which you can save a lot of work rather than having to go through each one of these and specifying what you're going to use to sort it. You can do an auto detect and then just go ahead and check to make sure that it's using the correct items. So now you can see that it's using year, and I know that that's correct for this particular item. It's using quarter key, which is what I want. Month key, I want that as well, and day key. So it's selected all the correct objects that I want for sorting. So we're pretty much done here. So we'll click OK, do the same thing for products. Okay, so we want to sort metadata. I don't really care about OLAP compatibility because I'm not going to be doing comparisons with dimensional functions on these, so I can leave that one as is. But I will do the detect. So 3 levels have been configured for me. And this is using the correct items that I want. So it's actually using product line EN. I would like it to use the string to sort alphabetically. Same thing for product type, and same thing for product. Okay? And that's it. So basically you now have something that's completely usable, modeled from front to back. Of course, we've missed items, like I said, implementing security or implementing macros, putting in more complex filters, that type of thing. There's all kinds of things you can do, but you really need to get some training to understand all those items, and you certainly can't get it within the hour and 15 minutes that we've used today.